Afternoon, everybody, and welcome along to this edition of LiR Confidential on lirmedia.tv and our usual email info@lirmedia.tv. We're delighted here at LiR Media to have one of our most prominent journalists, whether it's in radio, television, or print. Sinéad Ryan, welcome to the show.
Oh, thanks very much, Pat.
Great to have you. I was saying to you before we started, I don't know where to get the time to do everything. There you go. Now, you're a journalist, author, financial wellness training consultant. We'll come to that later. But at the present time, for people who may not know, but this first to do, the home show, that's going since 2019, is it?
Yeah, we're over 2 years on the road now, and I have to say it's been kind of a baptism of fire to some extent. I've spent decades on radio, on the other side of the mic. Yeah. And then suddenly to be on the presenting side is very, very different. But I must say it's terribly enjoyable. The team at News Talk are phenomenal, really. And to take such a niche topic, yes, like home, you know, everything from interior design to housing policy, and wrap it up in an hour on a Saturday morning is just the greatest fun. And also I get to learn so much and interview people that are so interesting about topics really that I don't know a lot about.
Yeah, because when I'm a radio nerd myself for my sins, when I saw that advertised first, the home show, you know, I was thinking tough fires and all that nonsense and stuff like that. But I was just thinking, how would you build a program around that? But as you said, when you think, so there's home finances, there's running the household budgets. As you said, so the world is your oyster. But as you said, when you're presenting the program, when you're in charge of a program, it's totally different than coming in and being part of a panel discussion. You know, it's a lot more relaxing that way.
Indeed.
But I think that I love the show. I'm not saying that because you're here.
Thank you. We've got a good steady listenership now, and it seems just to be nice coffee and croissant Saturday morning radio. And I'm conscious that people are either out on their 5K walk or they're in bed, you know, maybe with kids scrambling all over them, or they're pottering around their kitchens. And we try and gear the topics and the listenership towards people like me, I suppose, and maybe people like you.
Kurt's rising up and having your breakfast, but I think it's and I always love the slot, the 9 o'clock slot. I know it's just me on radio. You know, I think it's a prime time slot myself. That's my own opinion for radio, particularly on both on Saturday and Sunday morning. You know, because I mean, I don't watch much television anyway. You know, myself, so I'd rather the radio. But anyway, that's just me.
No, I don't think so, Pat, because I mean, lockdown has us far more on screens all day long now than ever we used to be.
You're burning out.
And then to kind of watch another screen in your leisure time just isn't for everybody, and it can be too much. And sometimes just looking at nature, going out for a walk, or closing your eyes and listening to it in your ears can be peaceful, maybe.
Yeah, because when we started this project, we began in January 2020 and lockdown was in March. So we've been on screen. I'm not making a negative point. We've been on screen consistently because we had to be. We can't be the studio outside in Limerick City. I'm sure you know well in Mallow Street.
I do indeed, yeah.
Are you from Limerick?
My dad was from Limerick. And I consider Limerick my spiritual home because even though I wasn't born there, I pretty much spent all my holidays down there, my summer. I've got an awful lot of cousins and family in Limerick. And my father only had one sister who lives in Limerick, out in Castletroy. And my mother was an only child. So in fact, my only cousins were in Limerick. So I'm up and down there, not so much this year, obviously, but certainly all of my childhood. And I love Limerick. I have hugely fond memories of it. And I'm a good old Munster supporter as well, of course.
Right. So that's fine. You're Limerick, a double whammy for us here. But one of the lads involved in the history program said to me last night as I was going home, he said, I said, Sinead Ryan, I'm almost certain there's someone belonged to her here in town, you know, because he's a genealogist as well, you know.
There's plenty. Ryan in Limerick now is narrowing it down anyway.
But How long are you involved in journalism, so to speak? Both.
About 20 years now, which sounds an awful long time. I trained originally as a financial advisor. I worked in financial services, and I did that for quite a long time, and that's my background. But I decided, when my children were very small, I just wanted a break and do something else. And I retrained. I thought I'd write a book, as the late great Maeve Binchy once said, everybody in Ireland thinks they have a book in them, and sometimes that's the best place to leave it. And it turned out that she was right. So I wrote a novel, and there was some traction in it, but it didn't get published in the end, and I lost
I love.
the will
I
for it.
Sense, CENTS, Sense and Sensibility, was it?
Well, no, that was way later, because actually I wanted to write a novel, and I did, but I just wasn't disciplined enough about it. I wasn't one of those who'd get up at 6 o'clock, write for a few hours, have lunch, write for a few hours. And that's the way you have to write a book. There's no getting away from that. You have to do it like a job. And I was doing it like a hobby. So my creative writing tutor said to me, look, why don't you do a course in journalism? Because it'll give you that structure, that discipline, the syntax, the construction of sentences. And I thought, oh, well, I don't want to be a journalist. I'm not going to do that. But I did the course. And that tutor said to me, look, this stuff isn't bad. Why don't you send it in for publication? And that was it. So I didn't look back at that stage. And the Evening Herald, actually, in Dublin, gave me my first break. I worked as a stringer for a local newspaper. I lived in Meath at the time, and I worked as a stringer on a local paper there, which is a fantastic grounding, because it means you get to go to courts, local news, the stuff that really matters to people about potholes and bridges and all kinds of things, planning. And then the book I did actually publish came later in 2010, because I had moved into the consumer and personal finance end of things at that stage.
Right, and of course, in the whole financial world today in Ireland, our banking on the high street is shrinking very much. I think it's very alarming for businesses, very challenging for business. I know that myself, I have personal experience of it. We don't really have any competition now in the banking industry in Ireland, which is, I don't say competition. I mean, you can't go along to A, B, C, and D. You're a percentage point better off. We're getting a 1.5% better off up here. Is it disquieting, Sinead? Is it alarming?
Well, it's not accidental.
Oh no,
when something like this keeps happening, you can only arrive at the view that it's policy, because there is the opportunity to not have this happen. It goes back to the banking crisis, and really doesn't everything. But after the crash, when we had the ignominy of the IMF and the European Central Bank coming in and kind of putting us on the naughty step and telling us what to do, as part of that, they put in supervisory controls so that we wouldn't do it again. And one of those, very strictly, instructed any banks operating in Ireland that they had to hold far more in reserve, that they didn't lend out and that they couldn't use. It was just sitting there like an insurance policy than any other country in Europe. Coupled with that, the government of the day and subsequent governments took the view that, and indeed the policy, that it would be politically incorrect and suicidal to allow banks do what they ought to do, which is, when somebody doesn't pay their mortgage, you sell their house, you turf them out. It happens in every other country. It happens in every state in America, and it's capitalism. And the government stepped in and said, we're not going to allow that. So it was inevitable then that banks, who are profit centres, would look askance at Ireland and say, well, hold on, I have to hold all this money on reserve, which I can't use. And somebody who doesn't pay their mortgage for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, I have to leave them there. I'm not even remotely surprised that foreign banks like KBC, like Ulster Bank, like Danske before them said, we can't turn a book here.
But true, we don't get bogged down in finance, but really, I'm just saying, Sinead, there aren't that many mortgages in distress, 50 or 60,000.
Yes, the problem is that there's no alternative for them, and this is the crux of it. The startling figure is that only 40% of homeowners in Ireland have a mortgage at all, and of those, about 6% are in distress. So you're quite right; it's not that many homes. The
No,
problem is that it's a lot of families, and
that's the crux of it.
one family being evicted onto the streets makes really bad headlines for an entire government. And so it should, by the way,
Well, yeah,
because there isn't, the government hasn't put in place the alternatives, which is that there are a whole bunch of people who should never be homeowners, ever. They should be serial renters because either their income or their circumstances don't permit home ownership.
yeah, we're out of kilter with the rest of Europe, really.
Totally. You go to Berlin, you go to Paris, you go to Rome. Finding somebody who owns a city centre apartment is rare.
Yeah, I have a son living in Berlin. It is all renting. They build houses, they build apartment blocks, and well, of course, it's different. You have security of tenure there.
Correct.
Because it's established for so long.
Yeah, but we can do that here. We just didn't.
Of course we could. We could do it in the morning.
Yeah.
We could do it in the morning. I get utterly mad when I talk about housing because I think our housing policy is apartheid. It is.
Yeah.
Apartheid policy.
Well, also we ourselves are to blame, and there's a kind of a blame to be attached. I don't mean to all of them, but to the Irish mammy syndrome, which I've referred to on the show and in print. And this is this obsession that we continue to have over home ownership, which is not the same as housing. So everybody should have the right to housing, which is not the same as having money thrown at you to buy a house and somebody over our shoulder saying, it's time you got settled. When are you going to buy a house? When are you going to settle? When are you going to...
family, I know all these things are you meet all these. I went through it all myself, but I heard the Minister for Housing, I mean obviously the present fella, and I heard them all saying it anyway. We're going to build affordable houses. We're going to build social housing. We're going to build middle class houses. We're going to build upper class houses. That's what I call it. We're going to build. I mean, what is the nonsense? Families, individuals are all the same. Like they do in Switzerland, they build 600 houses. They're all the same. If you can afford to buy it, you go and buy one. I can afford to rent one next door to you. I get a long lease on it, and I can afford to maybe buy two. It doesn't matter. They're houses fulfill the needs of society.
Correct, and at different levels. And the Austrians actually probably have the best model, because they have fully implemented the cost rental model. So there it is linked to what the unit costs to build and how much you earn. So everybody pays in proportion to their earnings, which I think is a very interesting idea. So you could be next door neighbours with somebody who's on 30,000 a year, you're on 60,000 a year, but your rent is commensurate with your earnings. And I think that's a very interesting way to proceed.
The model of Respond here in Ireland is a pretty good one, and there's many fine agencies.
There are, yes, there are. I agree with you, and I've interviewed quite a lot of them on the Home Show. However, all will tell you they're too bureaucratic. There's too many layers in the approved housing body model, and there's too much red tape to get where they need to go, unfortunately.
I know that from being an ex-civil servant for my sins. I know about forms and red tape. So half of my time is spent sorting out paperwork.
Indeed.
People like yourself, people phone in who sent in, talking them through it. It's a nonsense to me. Do you know Albert Reynolds was right? One page man. He was a one-page man when he said one time as a politician, just give me the one page and make it all, put it all in the one page, or maybe in the back.
Well, I've great hopes for the Land Development Agency. Of course, the good old Limerick man, John Moran, in charge of it now. And I had him on the show to talk about it and what they are, if he's allowed off the leash, how they might now go about procuring land in a different way, structuring the way people want to live rather than just building homes or building houses. It's about creating communities, and I think that's a very interesting idea.
The first thing about that, the land development agency, I know people, the very first thing many Irish people will do is, who's going to gain out of this? Who's going to get the dividend out of the land development agency? That's all the fear of them, the fear of the word developer. I think developer should not be a dirty word. Developers have done fine work in Ireland, building developers.
Well, somebody has to build it. So either we employ builders directly,
Exactly.
which we used to do in the 70s in councils, or you create circumstances where developers want to come in and build. And that it does involve profit margins, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. The Part 5 issue over delivering a certain portion to social and affordable housing is only fine where it is both social and affordable. And we're not finding that bit of it is working.
I think, Sinead, it's time to move on to the Austrian model in Ireland, because we're too small a country to be dividing people into housing, to be building walls. There are enough challenges in life for people and for young families than to be all housed and say, you're all over there because you're only earning 20 grand. You're over there because you're 300 grand. I think that should be gone anyway. That's my opinion. And with Sinéad Ryan here on LiRmedia.tv, we're delighted to have her. A Limerick woman, we can say, really.
Limerick in my heart, anyway.
Michelle, is the media still an old boys club?
I have never experienced that. Honestly, I haven't. There's a lot of there has been a lot of male voices, an overbearing amount of male voices on radio.
Media I'm talking about, yes.
Yes, yeah. I'd spent 5 years on the board of Women on Air, which is an organisation which tries to help women who do have something to say and have a story to tell to get on air to tell it. And it was a very informative 5 years, I must say. I thoroughly enjoyed it. And there are great strides now being made to utilise the expertise that is out there. I think in the past there was a sense of radio is such a fast moving medium, live radio particularly, that you don't have time to kind of sit and think through your policy about who will we get on to talk about such and such. And there has been a tendency in the past to go, who's the bloke we had on the last time? Let's get him again.
I know.
And you can't blame producers to some extent for doing that, because you can't be trying out brand new people, male or female, if you don't know what they're going to say and you don't know how they're going to be. That has shifted fundamentally, I believe. Not enough and not quickly enough, and very badly on regional radio, it has to be said. But on the national stations, and I know my own station, News Talk, which has had to come in for bad press on that score in past years, has really seen a seismic shift in that. No, I mean, I'm happy to say that the Home Show, which is my program, has the opposite problem. I have weeks that go by where I have a full female lineup because they just happen to be the best people to talk about the things I'm talking about. I mean, there are phenomenal female architects, designers, planners, environmental consultants out there, like really, really strong female voices. And it's wonderful to have them all on.
I've heard many of your shows, and they're phenomenal. There's no thing about that. But I think an awful lot of women are involved in media. They may not be behind the microphone as well,
I know, but you see, they need to direct, because that's not enough, Pat, with respect, because that has been the narrative up to now. Oh, they're researching and they're producing, yes, but they're not. Their voices aren't adding to the conversation. So, it's little steps. It's step-by-step stuff, I
think Sarah McInerney, she started in News Talk, didn't she?
She did. Of course, she was with Sunday Times. She was a fine print journalist. And was on, and as did Claire Byrne on News Talk as well. She did the breakfast show, and lots of people get their grounding on regional radio stations, which is a super training ground for anybody.
I spoke to Alison O'Reilly. I don't know if you know Alison O'Reilly recently.
Yes.
Well, we had a great chat about everything. It's straight into farming and all of that. But then, so there you go. But maybe you're right about regional radio, about lack of female voices. There's no doubt about that. Because I mean, KRFM, there's no woman on it. We're not going to go through them all. And I think Kerry Irish Radio Kerry and Limerick 95 here in my own town. There's very few. But we find you find it very difficult to get them as well. To get them
I
right.
don't agree with that. Not trying hard enough. You see, what we found in Women on Air was that the barriers to women going on radio are the same as, or not dissimilar to the barriers for them going into politics.
Right.
It's about competence. It's about, in some extent, childcare. It's about cost. In other words, if I'm doing this, I have an opportunity cost. I can't do that. I find that when I am seeking somebody for interview, not all the time, but invariably, if you call up a bloke and say, can you come on the radio to talk about X, they'll immediately go, yeah, sure, no problem. When do you want me?
What time? Yeah.
Yeah, and they won't say what do you want me for and what is it about and all this. They'll just go, yeah, sure, fine, or no, can't do it. Women will almost invariably go, oh, I don't know that I'm the best person for that. I'm not sure I'd be the best on that. See, so they have that sense. When is it exactly? And they're thinking, I have to pick up my kids from school. I have to get the dinner. I have to meeting here. There's probably 10 people better than me at that. I'm not going to be the best in Ireland in this moment at that. And that speaks to a wider societal issue about women advancing careers. So it's not that they're not available. Sometimes they don't make themselves available, but a lot of times we don't try hard enough to encourage and to help.
You're right about that, because I mean, if someone says, a man or mainly women have said, well, I don't know whether I'd be the right. I mean, it's just what word of encouragement can mean.
Yeah. I've never met somebody in a radio studio who wasn't the expert in that moment in what they're there to talk about.
Right. Yeah. And of course, we have Siobhan Gannon. She's doing a program with us every week. It's just, I think it's phenomenal myself. It's the Women's Empowerment Hour, I know it's called, but I remember when we were talking to her in the beginning, about it, because she appeared as a guest on other bits and pieces. I'd be able to do that. So just record it at home yourself and send it in. You do all the bits and pieces about it. And she has not been condescending. I don't want to come across that way. She's a natural. I always thought she was a natural anyway myself, and she settled into the rhythm of the thing. And someone will probably take her sometime down the line, but we don't mind that either, But Sinead, I know you're stuck for time, but the home show, how hard? I mean, who pitched that idea? Was it you?
No. I have a column that I write in the Irish Independent, which is called Home Economics, and it is about the finances and the personal finances of money issues to do with usually inheritance, building, law disputes, that kind of thing. And it's been running in the Irish Independent in the property supplement for, about 15 years now.
Yeah.
And because I also write so much in the personal finance consumer space, a lot of the times I'm covering home-related issues, whether it's SEAI grants or kind of planning stuff or your electricity bill or, mortgages. I had a slot on News Talk. I mean, I was kind of the go-to in that sense on those consumer issues for other shows.
And when you're regularly with Ivan Yates.
Yeah, exactly. And I still do a slot on the Hard Shoulder on a Monday with Kieran Cuddihy now, who's the new presenter. And I think it was just a meeting of minds in News Talk. They decided they'd like this kind of a show. They were prepared to give it a punt out, and fair play to them, because that's a brave thing to do. A brand new concept. There's no other show like it on national radio. And to kind of give it a punt out on an hour with a newbie was extremely brave of them, and that's really how it came about. I'm sure I wasn't the only one they thought of or auditioned for it.
Of course, with radio now, before we finish up, with radio, with advertising, with income, as I know myself down here in our small little studio, it's very, very difficult. It's very challenging, and it's very competitive trying to get sponsors and get people on board, as well,
It certainly is, and there's a big piece around that, and I know there's a conversation being had about that, because you have RTE who's allowed to collect the full license fee and advertising and sponsorship. And it's very difficult to compete with that when you don't have that, especially in a pandemic year where advertising has fallen off a cliff.
This has been going on too long. This conversation we're having is, to my mind, we're knocking anybody. We're saying level the pitch a small bit, level it a little bit, you know. It's been going a long time, and we have another minister for community. And Ryan was there before him, and Ryan, like, he knows, he should know we around it, you know. But anyway, look, these are challenging times, but it must be, you did EBS come on board last year with you in the beginning, didn't they?
We've had different sponsors throughout the year. You know, I mean, when they're there, it's great. I don't think they're particularly hung up on it. And it's nice that the show is recognised and that. But News Talk are committed to it, and I'm delighted that they have taken a kind of a chance with me on it.
I think for people who may not have come to it yet, I'm sure the listenership is building, but it's 9 o'clock on a Saturday morning while you're
and of course we're on podcast as well. And Pat, I can announce now today we're starting a new podcast actually, which will go out on air, and we're calling it at the moment, is going to be called the Money Pot. So it'll be all issues, personal finance and consumer related, which will go up on the Go Loud app. You know, I'm looking forward to that as well. So, and
the Money Pot obviously will be with money or lack of it.
Money or lack of it, indeed, and all the conversations around that. And of course, we found in this year particularly, there's a polarization of people now who have money and people who definitely haven't. So we're hoping to cover all bases with that.
So that's the Money Pot, a new podcast on the Go Loud app. When is that starting?
We're hoping now in the next week or two. It's above my pay grade to decide that kind of thing. But we've a few interviews in the bag, and hopefully we will be able to go live with that very, very soon.
Of course, an awful lot of these things have happened in the last 12, 14, 15 months because of the pandemic, where people are forced to go podcasting and online and all of that.
It's nearly mandatory that you have to have a podcast in lockdown.
Nothing like the buzz of a live studio, people looking at each other in the live studio.
There's nothing like it. I haven't had a live guest since October or November. So you can really feel it. It's not the same at all interviewing somebody on this way than it is without in studio, you know.
Sinead, I know you're stuck for time, but I don't know how you get time. I want to thank you for taking this time out of your day to be with us here. From a Limerick woman, Sinead Ryan, and from this edition of LiR Confidential, myself, Pat Barry. Until we meet again, Sinead, goodbye and God bless and the best of luck.
Thanks, Pat.